Most of us have heard of fatty liver being associated with alcoholism or consumption of large quantities of alcohol, but this isn't the only cause of fatty liver. The vast majority of fatty liver cases today are not related to alcohol consumption, but rather due to metabolic changes in the liver and throughout the body. There are various names for diseases related to fat in the liver due to metabolic dysfunction. We have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or metabolic-associated fatty liver disease using the acronyms NAFLD or MAFLD. In 2023, a decision was made to change the name to metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease or MASLD. Why we have to constantly make these names so complicated, I don't know. For simplicity, today we are going to use the term fatty liver through the rest of this episode. Fatty liver is the accumulation of fatty triglyceride globules in the liver cells. This can be medically diagnosed through a biopsy or through imaging of the liver. In later stages, this can develop into an inflammatory liver disease, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis or NASH, permanent liver damage via fibrosis, or even cirrhosis. Blood testing can also be used to evaluate liver health, although this is less direct than imaging or biopsy. But the specific markers that we would look at on blood work are AST, ALT, GGT, alkaline phosphatase, lactate dehydrogenase, bilirubin, and albumin. Now, a healthy liver does not store lipids, so any form of fatty liver is pathogenic. The liver is the primary producer of lipids, including cholesterols, triglycerides, and phospholipids, through a process called de novo lipogenesis, or the creation of new fat. This process occurs in the presence of insulin, as one of insulin's primary roles is to store fuels for later use. And this makes sense, right? When insulin levels are high, you are in a fed state, most likely having just eaten. That food can then be used for immediate needs or stored for use later. Insulin is a storage hormone. It also blocks the ability to break down stored fuels. This also makes sense. It wouldn't make any sense to be breaking down stored fuels at the same time you're creating fuels for storage, right? Now, there's no limit to how much lipid can be produced by the liver. It is entirely driven by the frequency and quantity of food coming in. Because this is influenced by insulin, the majority of lipid produced comes from carbohydrate consumption, which is stimulating insulin the most. The cells throughout the body don't all become insulin resistant at the same time or to the same level. One of the first cells to become insulin resistant is the fat cell, where insulin directly interacts frequently. When the fat cells become full, they don't want to listen to the presence of insulin, which is telling them to store more fat. To survive and not burst, they become resistant, so they don't end up packing more fat in. When they're not listening to insulin anymore, they're still releasing stored fats, which insulin is usually blocking. These released fatty acids go back to the liver to be processed and packaged for delivery to the cells that need the fat for fuel. But studies show that the liver doesn't release triglycerides or fatty acids directly into the blood. They get packaged into VLDL molecules for transport throughout the body. VLDL production is also insulin mediated. When the lipid production from the de novo lipogenesis exceeds the amount of VLDL transport capacity, the fat remains in the liver. So now you have all this extra fat, but you have no capacity to transport it anywhere else. So it just stays in the liver. In cases of metabolic dysfunction, fatty liver, blood glucose is elevated, which continues to stimulate de novo lipogenesis. So you're taking in all of this excess carbohydrate that is directly being converted to fat, which ultimately doesn't have anywhere else to go and it gets stored in the liver. Decreasing carbohydrate intake decreases the rate of lipid production, lowers the insulin levels, and lowers glucose levels. This causes the body to start using fatty acids for fuels instead of glucose. All combined, this is reducing insulin resistance, fat accumulation, and blood sugar levels. Reversing fatty liver is possible, and it actually doesn't have to necessarily take that long. Clinical studies have shown that when therapeutic carbohydrate restriction is followed, with carbs being reduced to less than 10% of daily calories, and reducing eating frequency to 2 meals per day without added snacks, remission of fatty liver can be achieved within 3 to 7 days in many cases. This can also happen with alcoholic fatty liver disease with complete abstinence from alcohol. Insulin resistance is the original foundation that leads to fatty liver. Insulin resistance develops due to chronically high blood sugars due to high consumption of carbohydrates and frequent eating. All of this is causing frequent and large insulin releases. So if you've been told that you have prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, obesity, insulin resistance, or fatty liver, there is hope. I would be happy to help you. All you have to do is schedule a free consultation with me to go over your personal roadmap to healing.